Welcome back to Outside Views, and bro, we need to talk. And today we have to talk about something truly extraordinary. It's a document so disconnected from economic reality, so fundamentally misguided, that it almost defies serious commentary. And I'm talking about Gully Fall's new book, 75 Brexit Benefits. 75 benefits. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? Like something from a satirical show, not a serious contribution to the national conversation. But here we are, and this book exists, and the arguments within it are being treated as serious economic analysis. Now, I've seen a lot of things in the years since this whole political disaster unfolded, but this level of determined optimism, or what I'd call simple delusion, takes a special kind of dedication. It's a dedication to ignoring the trade friction, the bureaucratic nightmares for small businesses, the loss of labor mobility, and the tangible, measurable harm to the economy. But the real focus today, let's put it that way, is on the author's so-called bonus, the 76th benefit, because it perfectly encapsulates the flawed logic at the heart of the entire pro-Brexit project. And this benefit is the idea that being free from the European Union's new digital regulations grants the UK a massive competitive advantage, specifically by allowing Apple's live translation feature to launch there faster than in the EU. And let's be absolutely clear. The idea that a single tech feature, which is, let's face it, a luxury, is a worthy compensation for the structural harm inflicted on the fifth largest economy in the world is not just a poor argument. It's an insulting one. It trades real long-term economic prosperity for a fleeting headline about a consumer gadget. The author claims that the EU's Digital Markets Act, the DMA, is a contentious piece of EU legislation that is quite literally preventing modern technology and services being provided to EU customers. Well, this is a spectacular piece of hyperbole, and we need to examine what the DMA actually is and what it is trying to achieve. The DMA is not some arbitrary piece of red tape invented to annoy Silicon Valley executives. It is a fundamental shift in competition law designed to address a problem that national antitrust laws have failed to solve for over a decade. The overwhelming entrenched power of a few gatekeeper platforms. And we are talking about Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft. And these companies essentially control the entire points to the digital economy. The DMA introduces clear proactive obligations, the famous do's and don'ts. And these are measures to ensure contestability and fairness. For example, gatekeepers can no longer self-preference their own services in search rankings over those of third parties. They must allow business users to promote their offers and conclude contracts outside the gatekeeper's platform without penalty. They are forced to grant interoperability, meaning smaller competitors get a fighting chance. And the DMA is a direct response to the killer acquisition problem, the tendency of gatekeepers to simply buy up burgeoning startups before they become a genuine competitive threat. It aims to foster a fairer business environment for the millions of small and medium-sized enterprises, the famous SMEs, that depend on these giant platforms to reach consumers. This is not anti-innovation, it is pro-competition innovation. It aims to shift the balance of power from the monopolist to the market. The penalties for non-compliance are colossal, up to 10% of a company's total worldwide annual turnover, showing the gravity of the EU's intent. And now, let's look at the specific examples cited. Apple's live translation for AirPods. The pro-Brexit argument is that because the DMA demands interoperability, the need to make their products available to consumers who do not use Apple hardware, Apple has to delay the feature for the entire EU market. This is what's known as a bad faith argument, and it's a brilliant piece of lobbying by a major corporation. The European Commission has already directly rejected Apple's claims, stating unequivocally that the DMA does not impede the launch of new products in EU markets. What is happening is that Apple is choosing to use the DMA as a shield and a public relations weapon. And I'm saying that as an Apple user. They say they are being forced to open their walled garden here. The DMA requires them to allow third-party developers and hardware to interface with their core products. For the live translation feature, the core dispute is about the integration of Apple Intelligence. If this feature relies on an AI model running on the iPhone, the DMA requires that competing translation services or competing earbuds should theoretically be able to access that same functionality without being blocked by Apple's proprietary system. Apple's narrative centers on security and privacy, the noble desire to keep user data safe. But critics suggest this is a smokescreen for protecting its ecosystem monopoly. They are setting an impossible standard. They claim they can't share the feature without exposing user locations or data, yet the whole point of the DMA is to force them to engineer ways to share access securely. If a company cannot integrate a new feature without cementing its monopoly and excluding competition, then that feature must be reviewed. The UK, by passively avoiding this regulation, simply allows the corporate monopoly to continue unchallenged. And this is not a benefit, that is a regulatory surrender. The EU is prioritizing the long-term health of the entire digital economy. Competition, consumer choice, and the ability of European startups to challenge the giants over the immediate gratification of a single brand-exclusive gadget. The alleged pornography and gambling apps that the author hysterically mentions are simply a consequence of giving developers the choice of distributing outside the App Store, which is exactly what a competitive market needs to allow. Apple maintains the right to review apps within its own App Store. The DMA simply ends its total control over distribution. The core mistake this entire argument makes is the confusion of regulatory ease with economic opportunity. Yes, the UK is now theoretically free to move faster on new regulations, or to have less regulation. That's the sovereignty argument in action. But what is the cost of this freedom? The EU single market has a GDP of approximately 17 trillion euros and is home to nearly 450 million consumers. It is one of the three largest economic blocs in the world. The DMA, the GDPR, the AI Act, these laws are known as the Brussels effect. Companies, especially US tech giants, do not engineer a product for 27 different regulatory regimes. They comply with a higher standard in the largest market to gain immediate access to the whole bloc. By stepping outside this orbit, the UK has not liberated itself into a nimble, agile regulatory paradise. It has chosen to become a regulatory rule taker on a massive scale, followed by a second-tier market. The UK strategy on digital regulation has largely been to create its own equivalent, the Digital Markets Unit, which is broadly aligned with the DMA's goals. And this creates the worst of all worlds. First, the divergence cost. UK businesses now have to comply with two different sets of rules, the EU's and the UK's, just to sell to their largest trading partner. And this regulatory fragmentation is a clear barrier to growth, especially for small businesses and fintech startups. And secondly, no market influence. The UK has lost its seat at the table. It has no say in shaping the DMA, the AI Act, or the future of the world's most comprehensive regulatory framework. If the EU makes a decision that affects a tech product, the UK now must passively react and decide whether to diverge, which risks trade friction, or converge, which makes the whole sovereignty argument hollow. And third, the loss of scale. Technology companies prioritize a market of 450 million people over a market of 67 million. If there's a dispute or a delay, where do they focus their compliance efforts first? That's the EU. The UK is simply not large enough to be a gravitational force on its own. The idea that the UK getting a minor airport feature a few months early compensates for the massive long-term costs of market fragmentation is a failure of scale. It's like arguing that because you can now change your living room curtains faster, you should bulldoze the entire house and rebuild it then brick by brick. The structural damage outweighs the decorative gain by an order of magnitude, doesn't it? And the author's entire thesis that the EU stifles advancement and the UK is thankfully now free is a profound misunderstanding of how global business and regulation actually function. It's an anti-regulatory ideology disguised as a strategic benefit. When the former Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg expresses concern about certain pieces of EU legislation, as the author mentions, it's being used to create a false consensus. Nick Clegg is an executive at Meta, one of the gatekeepers being actively regulated by the DMA. Of course, a company that stands to lose billions in market control is going to criticize the very law designed to curtail its power. To frame this as a universal acknowledgement that, as he said, we are better off out, is to ignore the source's massive financial incentive to lobby against the law. It's corporate self-interest, not a political epiphany. The long-term implication of the UK pursuing this path, the path of deregulation for the sake of speed, is highly concerning. It risks turning the UK into a destination for regulatory arbitrage, a place where companies can park certain activities to bypass consumer protection and privacy standards or ethical AI oversight. And while this might give a temporary boost to one or two sectors, it ultimately damages the UK's reputation for having high standards and reliable governance. And we see this risk in other areas as well. Discussions around diverging from the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, are another case in point. The GDPR is what allows the free flow of data between the EU and the UK. Any significant weakening of the UK's data protection standards risks losing this crucial data adequacy ruling. If adequacy is lost, the administrative burden and cost of transferring data, the actual digital lifeblood of many modern business, would be enormous. And the supposed benefit of light touch regulation becomes the massive cost of increased friction and isolation. So let's return to the 76th Brexit benefit, getting the new tech faster. This single, small, consumer-driven headline is being used as a distraction from the fundamental loss of economic influence and market scale. It's a glittering novelty being held up in front of a gaping economic hole. The true benefits of the European single market were not glamorous. They were structural, bureaucratic, and immensely valuable. Zero tariff, zero quota trade across a continent, the automatic recognition of professional qualifications, access to the world's most talented labor pool, a seat at the table to shape global standard regulation like the DMA, allowing the UK to influence the rules that tech companies must follow to operate in the entire bloc. The fact that the best argument an author can produce in 2025 is that a few British consumers get a translation feature on their expensive earbuds before their European counterparts should not, that simply should not be celebrated. It should be mourned, honestly. It demonstrates how tragically thin the actual tangible benefits of this entire political upheaval have proven to be. The focus is reduced from macroeconomic transformation to a single software update. It's a sad, small victory in the shadow of a huge, undeniable loss. And then you, the public, are the ones left to pay the price for this loss of influence, and the loss of scale, and the loss of future growth. So thanks for watching Outside Views today, and I'm really looking forward to your thoughts on that one. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Outside Views, of course. And if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen.